My very first experience with electronic games, if you were to consider them to be video, would be at the University of Utah. At the time, there were about 5 places where there were video screens connected to computers. University of Utah happened to be one. To put this in context, the idea that this may have a broader appeal was really because I was managing the games department at an amusement park summers. That's how I was putting myself through college. And it was very easy to see that the things that you could do with the computer were so much better than the stuff that I was able to put into the arcades. I mean, I can remember one arcade game that had nothing more than a rolling carpet with a little skier on a couple of rods. I mean, it was making big money. So, you know, you say, hey, I can do better than that. The original company's name was Syzygy. And we got that out of the dictionary, and we just thought it was cool. Of course, we were techies and engineers, and the fact that nobody could pronounce it or spell it didn't seem to bother us. People called us Syzygy and Syzygy, and we thought that it was great. The alignment of planets in a gravitational field, you know, and all that sort of stuff. But it turned out when we went to incorporate, we started out as just a partnership. It was already taken by a candle maker in Mendocino. So we had to choose something else. Atari was on the list, and we got the name from the game of Go, which we were playing at the time. And it's a Japanese game, and if I'm about to take a group of your stones, I say Atari, which is sort of like polite warning that you were going to be engulfed. And I thought that was a great aggressive name for a company. Syzygy was started in my daughter's bedroom. Computer Space was actually done in the daughter's bedroom. I had a 3-bedroom house, and I had 2 daughters. So I just put the 2 daughters together and turned her bedroom into the lab. The first game that I did was a game called Computer Space, which was loosely patterned off of the game that Steve Russell did on the Pt1 at MIT, which sort of went like wildfire throughout the computer environment from '69 through '70. It was a flying saucer and a rocket ship, and you'd fly around and you'd use Newton's first law, and you know, it was cool, and all my friends loved it, and all my friends were engineers. People ask me, did you ever think it was going to get this big? And it was difficult to quantify what big was in those days. Yeah, you were doing millions of dollars in sales and that sort of stuff, but in reality you didn't have a frame of reference. But I can remember driving in one morning and seeing this parking lot, and we'd outgrown the facility, and we had cars parked up and down the street, and the parking lot was completely full and double parked. And I thought to myself, you know, indirectly, games are paying for all these cars. And somehow the physical actuality of a car, and knowing how much that was, and there were so many of them, it was kind of, that was kind of a defining moment, because I can remember I said, wow, we've created a monster here. Atari was able to attract the best and the brightest. And you'd get in a room with some of these guys, and the synapses were, there was almost electricity in the air. And it was such an exciting thing to go after the best and the brightest and be able to bring them in. Because this was at a time in Silicon Valley where everybody was going to the bare cubicle and that sort of thing. We put in offices and hot tubs and various things. Well, it was very, very interesting. I mean, it was the early '70s in Silicon Valley, in California. A lot of hippies and rock music, and we were very young. And it was a kind of, in a way, we decided that it was going to be a little bit of a social experience, or experiment. And we had all kinds of company benefits and parties and things like that. I remember that when we went to get health insurance, that the health insurance guys had never seen a demographic that was so young. I mean, Al Alcorn was 27, I was 29, and I think the oldest guy we had was like 38. And a lot of our line workers were 17, 18, 19. And so they just never seen that kind of demographic in a company of, I think we're up to 200 employees at the time, 300. And so we got this, you know, we got dental, we got the eyeglasses, prescriptions for virtually nothing because of the statistics. But they made one mistake. They put in orthodontia. And so many of the girls on the line were young enough, they said, I've always wanted to get my teeth straightened. And so I looked out one day and the whole line was sporting new braces. Atari grew without venture capital. We didn't have a penny of venture capital until we were about 40 million in sales. And so as a result, we were constantly out of money because we were, you know, collecting money and paying, and I literally sweat every payroll because, you know, you'd say, do we have enough money in the bank for payroll? The answer was no. Who can I call up to collect some bills? You know, and it was just a fight and a push and a fight and a push. And I actually think that I wouldn't have sold Atari if I'd have just taken a vacation. But I was tired. You know, it was a fight, it was a struggle, and all of a sudden somebody comes along and offers you more money than you ever thought you were going to be worth, and you say, why not? The mainframes were actually connected. There were 4 places in the world: MIT, Stanford, University of Utah, and the University of Minnesota. And these were not traditional television screens. These were more like big oscilloscopes. They called them vector displays as opposed to raster displays. And they were very easy to program games which were very, very simple because you could draw vectors, but as you drew more and more of them, the refresh time would slow down and all of a sudden it'd start to flicker. So as long as you kept the number of objects you were drawing to a small number, you'd get good results. And then what Pong did in the first phase was to really bring it to the low-cost monitors that you had in your home, and because of mass production they were cheap. As an example, a vector monitor in those days cost $15,000, and whereas you could use a TV set for $100. And that was kind of one of the metaphors that allowed it to be everywhere instead of a few specialized computer centers. When I first started out, my plan was to take a mini computer, which had just come down in price. I mean, we always thought of, the very first time I thought of putting a game in an arcade, you take a $7 million computer and divide it by the number of quarters you have to put in, and the math doesn't work. And so then mini computers were $40,000 and then $30,000, and then all of a sudden across my desk came one that was under $10,000. And I said, aha, I bet I can do this. But my idea was to use one mini computer and run several displays so that I'd have more coin slots, so I could put it in amusement parks and things like that and make enough money to amortize this $8,000, $10,000 machine. What happened was I kept running out of cycle time. The computers were just too slow to keep all the, I think we were starting out with 6, and then I went down to 5, and then went down to 4. And if I went down to 3, I knew that the machine couldn't make enough money to really pay for itself. So that was kind of a watershed. So I had to get it to work with 4. And so in order to do that, I had to keep making the terminals smarter, have them do more of the work. for example, in computer space, there was a star field. Well, you chewed up a lot of compute time if you calculated the star field by itself. So I just figured out a way to put random dots up, and it didn't correspond to any known galaxy, but hey, it's okay. And things like that. But I kept running out of cycle time, even on the calculating where the ships were and interrogating the joysticks and all that sort of thing. And so I basically abandoned the project. I said, you know, this won't work. I've got to wait until the prices come down some more. And then, sort of out of the blue, one late at night, I said, why don't I get rid of the mini computer entirely and do it all in hardware? And that was the breakthrough that really created the launch. Pong was never considered to be a viable product at the outset. It was considered to be a training project for Al Alcorn, who was my first engineering hire. And I felt that some of the things that we were working on, I had a contract to do a driving game, which was quite difficult. I thought it was too big of a reach, and so I just wanted him to get his feet wet by doing a simple game. And so I said, ball going left to right, paddles going up and down when you hit the ball. And he did it and was able to finish the initial board in about a week and a half. I mean, he was very good. We were actually planning to have a little guy with a paddle that you'd place it with the knob, and then you'd push the button and the paddle would go there. And if you hit it too soon, it would go up, and if you hit it too late, it would go down, and so on. But we got the paddle on there, and we decided to just have it bounce off the paddle. We didn't call it the paddle that time. It was the part that was going to turn into the little player. And the game was fun, and so we said, hey, no need to gild the lily. This is good enough. We used this. It was called Andy Cap's Tavern at the time. One, because I knew the owner. Two, because we had already placed computer space in here, and this was kind of a mecca for not the suits part of Silicon Valley, but the techie parts of Silicon Valley. And computer space earned a lot of money in that environment. And so it was very easy to call up Bill and say, hey, I'd like to test Pong here. And he said, sure, bring it in. We had just put it in a little box. It was about like this, with the kind of cash box that you see on kiddie rides, just glued to the side. And we actually placed the box on a barrel. And that was the very first Pong unit. We had put the first unit on test right in this very establishment, right over there. And that was when the famous story about the service call, and the service call being that the cash box had completely filled up and the quarters would backed up through the coin mech. True story. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, and I looked at all the money we had in the world, and it was just enough to make 11, so we bought the parts for 11, built up, and never looked back. It was doing so well, I said, if I can't sell these 11, I can collect enough money just by putting them on location that I know I can pay for the parts and all the other things and keep the company running. And it was, very clear that you license something and you get a 5, 10, 15% royalty. Actually, with hardware, you very seldom got more than a 7% royalty. And yet there was a 50%, 60% gross margin possible. So you do a quick calculation and say, that's a better part of the business. It was a total smash hit. In fact, people started coming in early so they could get time on the machines. And that was the first time I ever saw quarters lined along to reserve a space, which has sort of become part of the mythology of video game sites. First of all, it was simple, and anyone could play, and yet it stretched you because we did the speed up algorithm so that no matter how good